In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. So, as I said, unity of God is not just one of the 5 principles, is not even enough to say it's the main principle. It is the principle of the principles. Everything goes back to unity of God. And if you study the Quran, you will find by far the emphasis of the Quran on unity of God is even more than existence of God. The Quran doesn't argue that much about existence of God. There are some arguments for existence of God, but it is something obvious. The main problem of human beings has been that they failed either to believe in one God or to practice and implement requirements of believing in one God. The Quran says, "En yu'minu aktharuhum billah illa wa hum mushrikun." Even most of the believers in practice, they don't serve only one God. Maybe when they say their doctrines, they mention God is one. But when they are doing business, when it is, I don't know, dispute over inheritance in family, something about next farmer, about land, do you see unity of God present there, or they are greedy, they are cheating, they are doing sometimes, satanic things. But when they are praying, they say we believe in one God. But if we believe in one God, we can never wish bad for others. We can never harm others. We can never try bad means to reach our ends. So, unity of God is the principle of the principles. There is a beautiful story in the life of our 8th Imam, Imam Rida alayhi salam, who is buried in Mashhad with Father William and our monastic delegation. In round 7 we visited Mashhad, and we have a beautiful clip also about our visit of Mashhad. He was asked by the Caliph of that time to become his prince, and he didn't accept, but he forced him that you have to accept. You have no choice. And he said, I accept with the condition that I don't appoint anyone, I don't dismiss anyone, I don't do anything, just as a title. Because he had no other choice, but he said, I don't want to interfere in any of your affairs. Anyway, he was forced to leave Medina and go to Marv, Greater Khorasan, northeastern Iran. And finally he was poisoned by the same Caliph, and he was martyred and he's buried there. So on the way, he passed the city of Neyshabur. Neyshabur is an old city. There were many scholars there, but the people who lived in that city, they were not Shia. The majority were Sunni Muslims, but they loved him because he was progeny of the Prophet, he was very pious, very knowledgeable. They loved him. So they asked him, as son of the Prophet, please share with us something. So imagine you are in that historical moment, all the problems that happen in the Muslim world, the Caliph is forcing you to leave Medina and go stay with him, what would he choose to say to these people who are all Muslims? Yeah, they're all Muslims. What he chose is very interesting. He quoted a hadith from his father, and then his father from his father, finally from the Prophet, and then from Gabriel, and then Gabriel from God. This is known as the hadith of golden chain, Silsilatul Zahab, because all the narrators are infallible. So this is the hadith. Look at his choice. Kalimatu la ilaha illallah hisni, faman dakhala hisni amina min adab. The word of unity of God is my fortress. Whoever enters my fortress will be saved. So, why he needed to talk about unity of God to Muslims who are already believers in unity of God? He could talk about many other things, but he once again, like the Prophet, had this understanding that if we human beings have unity of God as the center of our understanding and actions, we will have other things sorted out. But if we miss unity of God, we will miss other things. If we are with God, we can solve other problems. If we lose God, we cannot solve problems. We will just add to the problems. The late Allama Tabatabai, who is a great contemporary Muslim philosopher, mystic, jurist, and exegete of the Quran, he has a very interesting idea. Maybe I just keep this in hand. He has this idea that there are different attitudes towards ethics. Some people justify doing good actions by reference to good outcomes in this world. Some people justify by saying that you will be rewarded. And he says these two are okay and they are used in different religious or philosophical systems. But he says the Quran has a new approach. The Quranic system of ethics is based on Tawheed, on unity of God. Because according to Quran, as I said, if we are connected to God, automatically all vicious traits of character disappear. You cannot be under sun and remain in darkness. You cannot be connected to God and be selfish and jealous and greedy and unkind. It's impossible. Yes, you can think of God and remain with these, but if you are really connected with God, you cannot be except kind, merciful, helpful. So he says the Quranic system of ethics is built around unity of God. In my book, Unity of God and Unity in God, which is based on the lectures I gave in Sofia University, and it's online also, I mentioned how Muslim philosophers bring this idea of unity to their philosophy also. How in transcendent philosophy, this idea of unity is reflected. How in illuminationist philosophy, this is reflected. I don't have time to talk about this, but just I want to say it's present everywhere. In ethics, in philosophy, in mysticism, in Islamic law, everywhere unity of God is present. And maybe more present than any place is in Islamic mysticism. Because in mysticism, the idea is not only to believe in one God, to love God, the idea is to see God in everything. A mystic is not just believing in one God. A mystic just can see God everywhere. A mystic is not the one who loves God only. The mystic is the one who loves God and then through God loves other things. Yeah, a mystic is very kind, but not because he loves others independent from God. He's very kind because he has a godly love for people. You know, there's a difference between loving people for your own sake or for because of your relations or because of you have received from them, and loving people for the sake of God. If you love people for the sake of God, it has no limits and it can have no conditions. It's universal. Therefore, the mission of the Prophet was to be mercy, not for Muslim community only, not for believers only, not even for human beings only. His mission was to be mercy for all inhabitants of the world. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. If you are a man of God or a woman of God, what's the test? Once someone asked me, we had a conference with some Protestant friends at the University of Oxford. And one of our friends was talking about spirituality from their perspective. And I asked him, what are the signs of progress in spirituality? He answered, then he turned the question to me. What are the signs in your understanding? So it's very difficult, to summarize everything, but I mentioned two signs. And I believe this is a test for all of us. I said, in my understanding of Islam, if you make progress in spirituality, two things should happen, among other things. One, your moments of prayer should become very meaningful and precious for you. If you are a spiritual person, you should see the result in the way you make your prayer, in the way you respect prayer and prioritize prayer and feel when you are praying. Yeah, you cannot be a spiritual without feeling special when you are talking to God. The second sign is that if you are progressing in spirituality, then you would become more kind to people. Islamic spirituality is not just between you and God. It's between you and God and then people of God. No one can say, I am close to God, and then be relaxed when people suffer. Say, I am enjoying my connection with God. It doesn't matter if people are suffering or not suffering. It's impossible. If you are connected to God, definitely it makes you think about all creation of God with deep love, concern, and care. So, unity of God is present everywhere, especially in spirituality and mysticism. Now, what is the plan of God for us? This one God. He has a plan in creation which He has already implemented. He has a plan in His legislation which He has asked us to implement. We in Muslim theology, we distinguish between two wills of God. We say God has two types of will. Al-iradatu takwiniyya and al-iradatu tashri'iyya. One is generative will of God, one is legislative will of God. And this explains many problems. Many issues can be solved by understanding the difference between the two. For example, when you see there are problems in the world, when you see someone is doing injustice to others, is this according to the will of God or not? If you say yes, then they say how God is pleased with this. If you say no, then they say, then how this happened? If it was not will of God, how did it happen? If God was not happy, how this happened? We say God has two types of will. God was not pleased with this injustice in his legislative will. It means he didn't prescribe this. He actually said you must not do injustice. But when it comes to existential will of God, God has given human beings free will. And God lets us to exercise our free will. So if a problem happens, God has permitted that to happen, but has not been pleased with that to happen. Even God allows us to disobey him. Is it will of God that we disobey him? We say it's generative will, means he has given you power and freedom to do good or do bad. But he is not pleased with you doing bad things. He wants you to do good things. So, God has a plan in creation which he has implemented. God has a plan in his legislation, in his religions, that we human beings have to implement. Okay? Something he has done, something he has showed us the way, but he says, I want you to do it. In the Quran, God says, لَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَمَعَهُمْ عَلَى الْهُدَى. Had he wanted, means in generative will, he would have made all of you united. لَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ. If he wanted to make us united by force, he could have done it. He has all the power and means to do whatever he is pleased with. But he says, I want you to be united, but I don't force you. I show you the way, but I want you to work for unity. This is the summary of everything that the prophets and messengers wanted to do. They showed us what God expects from us. They helped us, but they said, you have to do it. Don't expect for God to solve your problems. God shows the way, but you have to take the challenge. So, when it comes to creation, God has done everything necessary for our unity, for our brotherhood and sisterhood. First of all, we are all created by the same Lord. Our Lord is the same. This is by itself enough to unite us. If we cannot unite under God, under which we can unite? Tell me something greater than God that can unite us. If God cannot unite us, nothing can unite us. Okay? So, we are children of God, creation of God. In addition to that, God has also created us from the same father and mother, Adam and Eve. So this is extra reason to feel united. If we were created from different, parents, or we were a result of evolution, etc., still we could be united under God. But this is additional reason to feel as members of the same family. In all of us, there is DNA of Adam and Eve. Okay? So we are all brothers and sisters. Then God says, I have created you from a man and woman and made you into tribes and nations, لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that you know each other. Imagine if all of us looked the same and spoke the same. How could we relate to each other? If I come to a room and see 200 people like, mass-produced, human beings, everyone is the same. How can I connect? How can I live my social life? It's beauty of creation that we have different colors, different ethnicities, different languages. But what was the reason? لَتَعَارَفُوا, so that you know each other. Was it the reason for superiority? No. إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. Color doesn't give superiority. Language, ethnicity, geography, they don't give superiority. If you want to go higher, you must be more pious, you must be more virtuous. And the only one can judge is God. إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. No one can say, my group or myself are better than others. We are all equal. God knows who is better. It's not up to us to judge. But we human beings, unfortunately, many times failed to listen to God. What was the reason for connecting with each other? We made it reason for fighting each other. Difference of culture, language, tribes was reason to identify and relate. We made it reason to say, I am better than you. You are superior. You said to me the same. I'm not saying everyone, but in the course of history, we have lots of stories of discrimination, racism, fighting just because of these superficial things like color or I don't know, ethnicity, geography, etc. So we turned what was supposed to unify us into what divided us. This is our fault. So God has made us in the way that we have all the reasons, all the means for unity. But then He has also guided us for establishing unity. I don't have time to talk about a general picture of relations that the Quran introduces into the book. For example, how should I connect with people who are enemies in faith? They fight me because of my faith. How should I relate with the people who are not enemies but they differ in faith? How I should relate with people of the book, which are neither the first group who are enemies nor strangers, people of the same family. People of the book, Christians, Jews are people of the same family. How I should relate with Muslims of other denominations. Everything is explained in the Quran. And you can find it in the book, so I don't have time to go into details. But basically, the Quran says that all prophets have come to unite people. There's a very deep verse in the Quran that exegetes have discussed a lot. كَانَ النَّاسُ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. God says there was a time that people were one united nation. أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. All mankind were one nation. But then they started differing and then conflicting. When social life became more complicated, then they were unfortunately divided. فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ. Then God sent the prophets. Prophets brought unity to people, but what happened was when every prophet passed away, then people were divided about what that prophet teach. So those who came for unification, then people started fighting about interpretation of teachings of that prophet. And this kept repeating in the history. So we have moments of unity, moments of division. Moments of unity, moments of division. For example, in Christianity, how many denominations we have? How many groups we have? In Islam, how many sects we have? You know, some say 73, but even maybe it can be more. Why? We were supposed to be united, but then we were divided again. Because, unfortunately, we have not prioritized unity of ourselves over other things. Many times I say to our youths who are doing something, for example, university, etc. I say, don't let any activity, any program divide you. Because sometimes, for example, they want to do this event, some people say yes, some people say no, and then sometimes they agree on majority, sometimes they divide. And I say, I can tell you 99% of the projects that you are going to do is not as important as unity of your group. Don't sacrifice your unity for a project. We have sacrificed unity of Muslims, unity of Christians, unity of believers in God for many other issues which are not as important as our unity. They are important, but not as important as our unity. A very beautiful example is the example of Moses and Aaron and Israelites. According to Quran, when Moses went to receive the tablets, he was away for 40 days. By the time he went back with the tablets, he saw some people started worshipping a calf. And he was very upset. God has gifted them with these tablets, and they have started worshipping a calf. He had asked his brother Aaron, that we believe he was also a prophet, to look after the community when he's away. He said, "Ukhlufni fi qawmi wa aslih wa la tattabi' sabila al-mufsidin." Okay, so he said, you are responsible. Make sure that everything goes in the good order and don't follow the path of those who want to make mischief. When he went back and saw some of his people are worshipping idols, he was very upset, and he was also angry with his brother. And even according to Quran, we understand that he took with his hand the beard of Aaron. Why you allowed people to worship idol? He said, "Yabna ummah, la ta'khudh bilihyati wa la birasi." Please don't, son of my mother. He didn't say brother, he said son of my mother, because when you mention mother, then you realize that you have to be united. Yeah. For the sake of mother, you have to be united. He said, son of my mother, don't take my beard or my head. I was worried. أني خشيت أن تقول لما فرقت بين بني إسرائيل ولم ترغب قولي. The reason I didn't fight and conflict with these people was because I was worried that you may come back and tell me why you divided Bani Israel, children of Israel, why you divided them and didn't wait for me. It means that even if some people start worshipping idols, Aaron felt that it's not at his level to cause division. Moses can decide about this issue. What should he want to do with these people? So look at the importance of unity. That even Aaron, as a successor to Moses, didn't feel he has the right to divide over this. Waited for the leader to come. So our unity is very important. We should not sacrifice our unity for the sake of other issues. So God has sent for humanity different prophets and messengers. In the Quran, there is no number of prophets. But from Hadith, we know that there were 124,000 prophets. These are guides chosen by God, spoken by God, role models that God has sent them to help us to understand our way. Out of these 124,000 prophets, there were 313 messengers, Rasul. Out of these 313 messengers, there were 5 who were the highest, ulul azm, those of great determination, which are Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. So for us, these 5 are the select of the select, because these are 5 out of 313, out of 124,000, out of the whole humanity. So you can see how much respect then we have for Jesus, for Moses, for Abraham, for Noah, and Prophet Muhammad, because these 5 are very high. But what was the core message of all these prophets and messengers? Prophets preached the message which was given to messengers, because it's not that every 124,000 prophets had a book or had a message. Messengers had message. Prophets who were not messengers reintroduced or emphasized or preached what was given to messengers. Okay? Quran says all the messengers had this mission. لَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. All of them basically said, serve God and don't serve Satan. Do good and don't do bad. This is the core message. How many religions God has sent? There is a common mistake. People think that God has sent many religions. These religions have commonalities. They come from the same root, but they are different. I think this is a mistake. God has not sent different religions. In Islam, I don't see any evidence, and I asked my Christian friends also if they have the same. I don't see any evidence that, for example, Jesus says, I am founder of Christianity. Has ever Jesus said, I brought a new religion? Indeed, he said, I have not come to abolish even a letter of the book. Moses never said, I brought a new religion. Abraham didn't say, I brought a new religion. All of them called people towards God. This call towards God, we call it religion. But it's not that we have something other than God to move towards. I sometimes say to people that I love my faith. Yeah, I love Islam. I love to the extent that I am happy to die for Islam. Okay? But I never worship Islam. I should not worship Islam. I should worship God. But unfortunately, many times we put God on the side. We say, God, you are in a fixed place. Let us fight for our religion. Our religion is more important. Our religion is not more important than God. If you worship God, then you can love other religions too. I love Islam, I love Christianity. My love might not be equal. Even you don't love your father and mother equally. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that you love, one of them. We can love our own faith, our own denomination more, no problem. But not by excluding the other, not by stopping to love others, not by stopping seeing beauty in others. I worship God, I serve God, and then I see how God looks at us. I have an example that I think can help in understanding the difference between our limited perspective and God's perspective. If you are in your family, father, mother, few siblings, and then you have your aunt and your uncle, suppose your grandfather, grandmother have 3 children. your family and your family of uncle and aunt. You love your father, mother, siblings, and hopefully you love your cousin and aunt and cousins. But the way you love them is different. The way you look at them is also different. You say, they are my relatives, but they are not my immediate family. There's a partition. Our family is this: father, mother, siblings. There is another family that we are connected, but it's different family. And for you, it's not possible to look at your cousins the same as you look at your siblings, or look at your uncle as your father. But what about grandfather and grandmother? For them, these are not separate families. For them, all these three families are part of the same family. Maybe they love one child more or one grandchild more, but this doesn't stop them looking at all of them the same, as one family without partition. Merits are different, but no partitioning. They never think, this is my family, that's a. The way God looks at us is much, of course, greater than parents, but just as an example. God doesn't look at Sunnis, Shiites, Catholics, Protestant, Orthodox, Jews as different families. We are all family of God. He may have knowledge of our differences, certainly, or merits are different. He knows. But we are all family of God. God has love for all of us. I cannot even think and imagine that God has love for a Muslim child, but not for a Christian child. I cannot think this. I cannot think that for God is not important if, for example, people of other faiths are poor, but if our community are poor, God is concerned. The way I understand is that God is concerned. If every child, any child in the world is suffering, God is concerned. Any woman is suffering, any man. If there is poverty, if there is illiteracy, if there is war, if there is discrimination, God is concerned. God is going to question us. It's not that He's only concerned for part of human family. So, how many religions God has sent? Just one religion. Our prophet is proud of being a follower of Abraham. Our prophet is proud to follow the example of previous messengers. For example, the Quran says, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ دِينًا مِمَّنْ أَسْلَمَ وَجْهَهُ لِلَّهِ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ وَاتَّبَعَ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا. Who is better in faith than someone who submits his face to God and does ihsan, he's kind and does benevolent acts and follows the path of Abraham? Our prophet follows the path of Abraham. Abraham himself, Quran says, إِنَّ مِنْ شِيعَتِهِ لَإِبْرَاهِيمَ. He was following the path of Noah. Noah was following the path of previous prophet. There is one river coming from God. At each moment in the history, different people were showing us the river. But it's one river. We should not think there are many rivers sent by God. It's one river. One light. Interestingly, in the Quran, not in Arabic language. Arabic language is very general. Even our hadiths are not as precise as the Quran, because Quran is with God's standards. In the Quran, you don't find plural for light. You don't find anwar in the Quran. In Arabic, plural form for light is anwar. Nur is light, and light is anwar. In the Quran, we have nur, but for darkness, we have plural, zulumat. Light is one. Because Allahu nurus samawat, God is the light of the earth and heaven. There is only one way to find light. But for darkness, there are many ways to remain in darkness. One solution, but many problems. Like, health is one thing, but illnesses are many. Either you are healthy or not, but to be ill, there are many ways to be ill. There is one truth, but there can be many mistakes. So, light is one. In the Quran, deen is never used in plural form. In the Quran, we don't have adyan. In Arabic, we have. But in the Quran, we don't have adyan. We have deen, religion. The maximum you can find is when God says to the Prophet to say to the pagans that you don't worship God and I don't worship your idols. Lakum dinukum waliya din. You have your own religion, I have my own religion. This is the maximum you can find, that religion is used for two things. Okay? So religion is not used as plural form when it comes to the prophets and messengers. The maximum is that God is saying to the prophet to say to the pagans that you have your religion and I have my religion. But if you reflect further, you realize that their religion is not true religion. It's not real religion. I'm not talking about good or bad. I'm saying it's fake. Why? Because religion is to submit yourself to a transcendent reality. Those pagans were not submitting themselves to anything other than their ego. So they said idol worshipping is our religion, but they had no religion. They were doing whatever they wanted. They were hiding behind idols. Okay? So there is only one religion. Either we try to listen to God, or we make human beings as the center of the world. We do whatever we want. Religion means you feel that you have to acknowledge that there is something greater than you. Truth is greater than you. God is greater than you. You cannot decide whatever you want to live or marry or have your business. You have to learn from God. Yeah? This is religion. Otherwise, you just worship yourself. So, light is one. Religion is one. Even book is one. Although the Quran uses books, kutub, but if you reflect, you find out that when God talks about Him sending book, He uses singular. He doesn't use plural. جاءتهم رسلهم بالبينات والزبر والكتاب المنير, not والكتب المنيرة. The messengers brought clear signs, scribes, and the illuminating book. We have one book, but different editions. We think Torah, Injil, and the Quran are different books. But the Quran says these are different manifestations or different presentations or editions of a divine book. Okay? Therefore, we say, Ya Ahl al-Kitab, not Ya Ahl al-Kutub. We don't say, Christians, Jews, Muslims are the people of the books. We say the people of the book. And there are many verses. I have explained this in some lectures and papers. So one God, one religion, one light, one book, all to help us to achieve unity. But unfortunately, we have taken our differences so seriously that we have failed to appreciate our commonality. You know, our example is like husband and wife. Sometimes they have lived together 20 years, 30 years. Okay, they have children, they have lots of common memories, but then few issues happen, and then they say, we don't have anything in common. We cannot live together anymore. How you cannot have anything in common? You have lived together for decades, you have children together, you have lots of beautiful memories together. But when something bitter happens, you forget all those things. You just focus on negativities. You focus only on the risks. We have to train our mind to see commonalities. You don't need to train your mind to see differences. Automatically your mind goes to the differences. You need to train to see the commonalities. Your mind quickly notices changes, but what is fixed and stable, you need to train your mind to understand. So, our idea is now that instead of just having dialogue, which is very good, we should have something more. Dialogue is very basic, and it is sad that even sometimes we don't have dialogue, but dialogue is not enough. If we were wolves and then we were able to have dialogue, we should be happy. Thanks to God, now wolves are talking to each other. But we are not wolves that we are happy that we are talking to each other. We are human beings. We should be happy when we live as fellow brothers and sisters. Just to show respect, just to be peaceful is not enough. Humanity is not just not to fight. Humanity is to show godly love to each other. So is dialogue enough? No. Unless we reach fraternity, universal fraternity, we are not showing what human beings are. The angels, when God said he's going to appoint his vicegerent on the earth, they were concerned. أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. Oh God, are you going to put people that are going to shed blood and do mischief? The angels were seeing the negative side. They were not able to see the potential of human beings and to see that it's only human beings who can be image of God, who can be vicegerent of God. But how can you be vicegerent of God? How can you represent God on the earth? By looking at people from God's eyes, not from your human limited eyes. So sometimes, I mentioned this example. Actually, this point came to my mind when we were in Italy, in Rome. We were talking about love. This idea came to my mind. That we have two types of love for God. One is you love God as an object. You want to possess God. You say, this is my car, this is my house, this is my computer, this is God. You think you have ownership of God. This is my God or our God. This God is for our sect or our tribe. It's not your God. Okay? So then what happens when I transform God into a tribal or sectarian God? Then that God becomes very dangerous. Because God, who is a tribal God, has no interest in other tribes. The maximum says, okay, have peaceful relation with them, but don't bother about them. God of A tribal kind is limited. God of a sect is limited. We have brought God down and made God into like a human being with all the limitations. But the second type of love for God is that you don't want to possess God. You don't want to dictate to God what God should feel and will. Unfortunately, many times we dictate to God that God, I am sure you think like me. We do our mischief in the name of God. We fight each other in the name of God. How is it possible? Can any child fight his brothers or sisters and say, I do it in the name of my mother? In the name of my mother, I can kill you. Is any mother in the world accepting children killing each other for hell glory? It's impossible. If a mother would not allow her children to fight, how God can allow? But we have our own God. We have our sectarian God. Then sectarian God just gives me, sanction to do whatever I want, and He is going to give me heaven. I do all the mischief, and then He gives me heaven. Because this is not God, this is me, my ego. My ego is projected. But the true love is that you let God possess you. Instead of you making God a tribal or sectarian God, you become a godly human being. Don't bring God down to your level. Go higher and higher. And try to look at human beings as creatures of God, as people of God. We need to achieve this type of love. And for sure, this type of love would come with great interest in unity. Unity of God is reflected everywhere, apart in human life. That is where we need to achieve. In creation, unity of God is reflected. The Quran says, if this world was from anyone other than God, you would see lots of problems. There is harmony, there is order. Unity of God is reflected in the nature, in galaxies, everywhere, even in our human body. But when it comes to human relations, God says, I want you to establish unity. He didn't want to force. So we need to work for unity. How much time? Okay. So I will request a clip to be showed, and then I will make the final comments. As a context, I will talk after this clip about one good project that we have, Wings of Unity. And the idea is that we Muslims and Christians who know each other for decades, we think together, we pray together, and we ask God for guidance. So I will explain afterwards. One of the outcomes of this project, which we have started in 2016 in Italy with Sofia University, is that we have visits. We take groups, Muslims, Christians, we spend a few days together, and we discuss from both sides the idea of unity. So what you are going to see is about one of our trips to Switzerland, where we spent a few days in Geneva with World Council of Churches, but this part is when we visited Monte, which is one of the Mariapolis centers for the Focolare movement, with whom we have this experience of Wings of Unity. And you would see an old lady who passed away afterwards, in her 90s. She was one of the early companions of Chiara Lubich, the founders of Focolare movement. She was very spiritual, and she spent many years in Monte, was responsible for the formation of new people. So you would sense the level of love and unity that we experienced in that trip.